hello, lovely people. Fiana's back with another video. I seem to not be posting fully like once a week at the moment, but it's like roughly once a week. Just maybe like once every 8 or 9 days sometimes. But I hope that's okay. I'm doing my best to be more consistent than I've been before, at least. I'm back with another video now. And today, from the thumbnail you probably know, I'm doing my book review of Storm in the Teacup. It is a book written by a lovely girl called Emma David. Her Instagram handle is also Storm in a Teacup. She posts a lot of mental health related stuff, some quotes, and then her own little snippets of writing about how she's feeling and or just trying to help people feel better about their experiences with mental health. So yeah, if you haven't already, I would go follow her. As I've said in a previous video, but I'll reiterate for the purpose of this video, she sent me her book to review it, and I finished reading it a little while ago, but I wanted it to give it some time before making the review to sort of collect my thoughts, figure out whether I wanted to put the review in the form of an Instagram post or a video, or like just how I wanted to do it, because reviewing something is not something I have done before, although I am interested in doing more of it. If the viewers would like that, then I can review more things, review other books, maybe films, anything. But given this is the first time thing, and the author herself reached out to me saying that she really liked my content and she thought I would be a good fit to be someone to review her book, I kind of have felt very much like I just want to do this right. So that's why it's taken a little bit of time to think over it, write some things down in this book that I'll probably read from a bit. Yeah, I just wanted to give myself time to do that, but I'm here now and I'm making the video. If you want to know her story in full, I would suggest reading the book, although I do have some trigger warnings for you that I will reiterate later. But yeah, if you want to read the book and you feel safe to read the book, then I'm pretty sure it's available on Amazon and some other sources that I'll put up here for you, so that you can go get it if you would like to read her story. Because obviously I'm not going to go into depth on her story specifically and everything that was included and all of that. I'm just going to give you my overarching thoughts on what I read and how I feel about it. I hope you enjoy anyway. I hope it gives you an idea of what you might be getting into if you want to read it. I guess we should just get into it because I don't really have much more rambling to do. Okay, so if I am looking down here, it's because I've written down my thoughts, and for the most part I'm just going to read it. This was clearly a very deeply personal story for Emma to put together and write it out and put it into the world to hopefully help others, and for that I very much commend her bravery. It's not something that many people could do, to go into such painful detail, relive and revisit all of the things that she wrote about, and you know, she had to then reread and read over everything in order to like put it out as a book. So I'm just kind of, for that I want to, yeah, remind you how brave you are, and that's such a big thing for you to have done, and it is something so important to help people understand how scary psychiatric facilities can be, especially when they are underfunded and house people who are suffering so severely. The story is not just of her own, but those of her fellow patients that she heard of through those fellow patients are so sad and, you know, incredibly traumatic, and it's difficult to hear about such horrible things happening to people. So I imagine the things that she witnessed in there and then later wrote about must have just added to the trauma in her life. So I fully respect her for wanting to put out her story to hopefully help people, even though it must have been so difficult to not only live through but then write about and share with everyone. It must feel very vulnerable. So yeah, I'm proud of you for that, and that's so brave. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, it was difficult to read at times. Just to be blunt, as someone who suffers with her mental health, many things in the book were triggering for me to read and think about and imagine in my mind. So here is the trigger warning. This is something I would warn against for others who may wish to read the book. If you suffer or have previously suffered with self-harm, eating disorders, disordered eating, body dysmorphia, negative self-talk, and sexual assault, I would be very careful about reading this book. This is not to say you should stay away and never read it. It is just to say, please make sure that you are in a stable enough place that reading the book will not negatively impact your mental health. You know, hearing about these topics can trigger people and it can sometimes cause relapses or whatever. This is not to blame Emma if anything like this were to hypothetically occur. It is not her fault, but you should be wary before going into this of how raw and detailed a lot of these topics are covered on. So just be careful of that. I would say if you want to read it, wait until you feel like you will be safe. It's most important for you to look after yourself, make sure that you are safe, and then if you want to read it, go ahead and read it. It goes into so many things that are probably quite relatable for a lot of people who have suffered with mental health, and it can, you know, be a helpful, useful thing for you to read and know that you're not alone. But if there's still even the glimmer of possibility that it could negatively impact your mental health in some way, or you might be sent into some kind of spiral or anything like that, if you know that hearing about these things are too difficult for you, don't read it. At least not yet. Give it some time. Just pre-warning. Yeah, I would say that the raw detail described in this book was not something I was quite expecting, and it did take me off guard. I knew, obviously you know from reading the title, that it's going to be a personal and intimate account of someone who has been in 2 different psychiatric facilities and has suffered incredibly with her mental health. You know that's what you're getting into, but I was taken off guard by some of the detailed graphic descriptions, and it's just something to be careful about. Don't worry about me though, I was safe while I was reading it, I was okay, but it did affect me. And again, this is not to say anything bad about the book or Emma for having written it in this way. This is her story to tell at the end of the day. It is very, like I said, deeply personal to her, and the only person that can dictate how she wants to tell her story is her. So I'm not bashing her in any way. I want to stress that it, you know, just because I'm telling you that it could potentially be triggering, and it did feel a little bit triggering for myself, that's not to say anything bad about the book. It is, sometimes there are incredibly important topics that are difficult to hear about, and it is, I guess, sometimes on the responsibility of the reader to handle it the best we can. Say topics of, you know, sexual assault or racism even in the media right now, lesser talked about mental health conditions. Sometimes these things are difficult to confront the reality of, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it just because it feels hard. Some things it's just important to educate yourself on and to know more about, so that you can be a more understanding, empathic individual in your own life towards these difficult subject matters. Yeah, like I said, one of the lesser talked about mental health conditions is borderline personality disorder. I know slightly more recently there are YouTubers that have talked about it, like Marie, and even Anna Campbell's talking about it a little bit, but it is a stigmatised condition. People tend to brand those with BPD as cold and manipulative and dangerous to be around. It is heavily stigmatised and lesser understood, and there have been, you know, I can only think of one portrayal of it in the media, in the film Girl Interrupted. You've probably heard of it. If you haven't, I haven't watched it for a while, so I can't quite remember how they portrayed BPD specifically, or how they portrayed psychiatric facilities specifically. But some people don't like that film and think it's, you know, misinformative. Some people do love the film, but it is a known fact among those who understand mental health more and who maybe have BPD that this is not the reality. People who suffer with BPD have very different experiences of the condition, just as anybody does with any mental health condition. But there are a lot of things that if you suffer with BPD or anything that you might relate to her on, it probably will make you feel better that someone is giving you a real life personal account. I believe that the way she expresses her experience with BPD, which is a lesser talked about mental health condition that is highly stigmatised, is very likely important for sufferers of BPD, real life sufferers of BPD. You know, there are some cases where people glamorise such illnesses and over dramatize them or something. It's just not real life, whereas this story written by Emma is her real life, and maybe that helps people with BPD to know that factual information of someone's experience is being put out there, and hopefully like eventually more people will talk about BPD and it will break the stigma more. I imagine it could be helpful to people that can relate to it, like her experiences with her difficulties with her self-image and relationships. Like even I personally, I'm not diagnosed with BPD. I haven't seen a mental health professional for a long time, let's be honest, and I haven't been assessed for a while. I don't really know the full extent of what conditions I may or may not have. I have at times suspected myself of having a personality disorder, but I can't say. I'm not going to self-diagnose, but I know that like the way she expresses her difficulty relating to people and opening up to people, connecting with them, being vulnerable, and the intensity of some of her relationships too. I found that so relatable, and although I feel for her and the difficulty she's faced in that, it makes me feel slightly better, because how difficult I have found relationships in my past just has made me feel like such a social pariah, and just like there's something incredibly wrong with me. And you know, that's just, we're just human. We're human, and we struggle sometimes with any aspect of human existence. It's okay, and I appreciate her portrayal of that. If you relate to someone who has struggled with these things, or has been in a psych ward for whatever reason, this book could definitely help you feel less alone, I would definitely think. Sometimes we can think we're absolutely batshit crazy and just a weirdo, but we're not the only one who've had these thoughts and these feelings and experiences. We're not freaks. People who suffer with mental health and or mental illness are not crazy. We're just real people with real lives and real different personal forms of trauma, and that's absolutely okay. I mean, life is not perfect, the world is infallible, and we as humans are infallible, and yeah, it's important that people know that they know that there's not something deeply wrong with them. They're not crazy, they're not a freak for having suffered in these ways. Emma released this book around 10 years, I think, after the time period in which she writes about, so I feel like this book shows that things do get better and we can survive even our most raw rock bottom breakdowns. This is not to say that Emma has not suffered similarly and deeply with her mental health since the time period in which she ends the book up to now. I can't comment on that, she hasn't written about that, but the fact that she has gotten to a place where she can write about some really deep personal moments that were difficult and life-altering for her, that she now feels able to put that down on a page and, you know, come to understand it and articulate it in a way that she feels comfortable enough to share that with the world. I feel like that just says something quite profound about recovery, and how sometimes in those moments we might feel like it's completely the end of the world. Like, we're not going to survive this, it's always going to feel this horrendous, how is it ever going to get better if we are doing this, that or the other that makes our mental health worse. The fact that she's able to write about it now and put it out into the world, and she's still here, alive, relatively safe in the current climate, you know, is incredible, and I love that. I love that that is what she's done. I appreciate that. She brings us into some of her very personal, difficult moments in this book, as if we are right there experiencing it with her. She shows us that given time, we can go back to experiences like this of our own and be okay enough to write about it, and know now that we are safe and we have been okay again since. I just think that's so important to note. At the end of the day, some of the deep personal moments that she writes about are raw and graphic, and it's the fact that she can revisit that place and know that she is okay now, hence having written about it and put it into a book and sharing it with the world. I just think that's so important, and it speaks volumes. My only thing, of course, would be very careful of the fact that there are things of a triggering nature in there, like relatively graphic descriptions of her in self-harming and people in the psych ward, her witnessing people self-harming, her witnessing all sorts of horrible things, hearing about all sorts of horrible things, and that can be difficult as someone who has suffered with their mental health to read about. And it is not necessary for you to subject yourself to that if you aren't in a good enough place. don't feel like me making this review, hopefully overarchingly positively to you guys, is me saying, oh, everyone should go buy it. If you're not in the right place, if you want to buy the book, buy the book. Wait to read it till you feel like you're going to be safe, that's all. That's all I would stress. That's all I feel like I cannot overlook, because I would hate to think, obviously ultimately it's not my responsibility, it's not Emma's responsibility, it's hard to say, but I would hate to think that maybe I encouraged someone hypothetically to read this book and they read it and they were triggered and it caused them to spiral in some way and act on negative thoughts. I would hate to think of that happening, so I feel like I have to stress to you to be careful. Just the same with like so many things out there, like pro-ana websites exist. There are social media accounts like Tumblr and Instagram that share images of things that no one should have to see and graphic descriptions of things that no one should have to see, and the pro-ana websites encouraging people to inflict negative harm on their body. Those things, this is not what this book is like, I might also add. In no way, shape or form is Emma ever saying that she approves of her, you know, negative coping mechanisms that she describes in here. She's not saying that people should go and do any of this, and if anything she's trying also to warn them against getting into habits like this, and obviously it's not as simple as that sometimes, but that's not what she's doing. She's not trying to encourage it like some awful media out there is, but you know, there are some things that need to be warned against because they can be triggering, and that's just the end of the day. But overall, I'm really so impressed, and I don't know her too well, but I want to say that I'm proud of her for putting the story into a book, being so, it must have felt so vulnerable and exposing to put it all out there and share it. But it's important stuff to talk about, not just from the perspective of people who suffer with their mental health, and you know, maybe it could help those who don't suffer with their mental health as much to understand people who aren't as neurotypical, to understand mental illness more, but also on the side of just like psychiatric facilities in general, and the fact that, you know, if they're underfunded, that causes a whole bunch of problems. Even the personal cases of people needing to go to a psychiatric facility, each case of that has to require funding, so they have to like request funding from a board of people who then let you know whether they think this person is like worthy enough of being sent for help. And it's just, some of it blows my mind, and I think it's very informative to hear about those sorts of things, that like the world of psychiatric care and mental health care is not perfect. It's far from perfect, and yeah, when there is such underfunding, it can cause problems for the people who need that help, because they're not getting the best help that they could get. They're maybe not getting help at all in some cases, because they'll just decide that they don't have the money for it. People are in the psychiatric unit and maybe they're not fully better yet, but their funding is coming to an end, so they have to send them home. And that really freaks me out, and it worries me for people who are really, really ill and in that position. So maybe her telling her story like this and sharing this information could help people know that action needs to be taken on that side of things. Somehow we need to get more money into mental health care in the industry. It's just not okay that people get left in these situations and then they aren't treated the best that they could be treated. So yeah, it's an important read on so many different levels, on the level of BPD, which is not always talked about, on the level of just people who have suffered with their mental health but are in a better place now, reading it and thinking, wow, okay, the fact that I have been through something similar to this at some point in my life, it wasn't just me. And also on the fact of the psychiatric care needing to be better and the problem of underfunding. I don't really know too much more of what to say. I feel for you if you've ever had to go inpatient, if you've ever been in such a dark place that that's where you needed to go, and potentially while you were there, your trauma and your difficulties were just added on top of instead of you being helped, because I feel like that is one of the big things that happens in these places. They don't always help you, they can make things worse, but I guess the main point of people going there is because they are at risk and they need to be there so that they are protected and care is on hand as quickly as possible or as closer as possible than they would be if you were living at home. I know that people need to be sent there sometimes, but it doesn't always mean that they will get better as a result of it. They might just be merely kept safe as a result of it, and it's potentially a very flawed system, but that's the way it is, and it's important for us to know that so that maybe things can be done about it. I also want to stress that I forgot to say in the beginning, but I wasn't paid to review this book. I'll be blunt, sent this book for free, so I guess it was gifted to me, but I'm not being paid to say anything that I'm saying right now. Emma just kindly sent me this book for free, and under the agreement that I would eventually share my thoughts when I felt able to. So that's what I'm doing now. But I hope that reassures you that my thoughts are my honest opinions, and I even tried to be, you know, raw about the fact that you maybe shouldn't read this book in some scenarios. But it's been very eye-opening to read, even as someone who suffers with their mental health. It doesn't mean you know, even as someone who suffers with their mental health and reads up on mental health subject material. I'm even studying a master's in psychology right now. That doesn't mean I know everything. Obviously, I know I don't know everything, but just to reiterate that, it doesn't really need to be said, but it helps to learn more, and that's what this book provided for me. Amazingly brave and awe-inspiring of Emma to open up so much to an evidently hurtful and traumatic past. I hope that some of the experiences she talks about in the book can be validating, comforting for some to read about in an odd way, but it helps you feel less alone. I suppose that's the long and the short of it. It's a very good book. She's very articulate, it's well written, it's a real life story, it's so personal. We don't get to hear about things like that very often, so I think it's unique and important. So in every other case except if you are in a vulnerable place where you might be triggered, I would recommend reading it in every other scenario. I'll round this up. That's the end of my review. I hope everything I said in this video was okay. Emma, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I did love reading your book, even though at times it was difficult to read about, but I understand the importance of everything that you said. At the end of the day, I'm okay. I read it and I'm fine, and I'm very appreciative of the opportunity. So I hope that's okay. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you watched it, I hope you are safe and sound, and I hope you are handling the current world climate and national conditions with the pandemic and the lockdowns. I hope you're okay, regardless of what you might be going through right now on any level. Please stay safe, please distract yourself as much as you need to, process everything however you need to safely. Yeah, I love you guys so much. Just be careful out there. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment if you have any other thoughts. If you bought the book and you've read it, if you have thoughts, share them in the comments. Please like and subscribe, of course. That will help me spread my channel. I'm not too far from 200 subscribers. I would like to be one of those people that's like, let's get to this level by the end of the year. But, you know, I'm still so small, so growth does not happen so quickly for people like me. But yeah, I hope that we can continue to grow and evolve together, and that you continue to enjoy my content and what I want to share with you guys. But yeah, bye bye. Thank you for watching. Love you.